Okay, so it is 87. Every podcast, I sit here and go, what episode is it? 87, 86, 87, 87. It was when Xanon was born. That's how I know it was 87.
That's it.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You've seen his Instagram page. Just
yeah, he's a punk.
It's an absolute. His DMs. Oh my god! Like I've been told that he has to pay somebody to manage his DMs.
My DMs are sort of shiny, sort of black leather. That's about as much DMs as I get, mate. You know. So
yeah.
Ever float your boat?
It brings a new angle to taste the leather, doesn't it? It's you don't think. And it's episode 87 of Below the Belt, and we are joined in association with Boxing Social. Doesn't that sound sexy? And we are joined today by esteemed writers. Paul Xanon, he's almost a regular now, Paul. And today, Sean Brown. How are you, gentlemen?
All good, Cal. Yourself, mate?
Yeah, man, wonderful. And Sean, how are you, sir? Welcome.
Very well, thanks for having me. Fine. Let's crack on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's crack on then. So what we used to do when we have new people on the podcast, we always used to like introduce them to the audience. And so one of the things that we would do is kind of ask about what got you into boxing. So what I'm going to ask you, Sean, is, as you're the newer one, if you like, what's your favourite fight to watch on repeat?
Hagler Hearns.
Hagler Hearns, yes.
I know it's quite an obvious one to many, but I was not raised on that era, but my dad would talk about that era a lot. So when I was about 8 or 9, 10 years old, I would often hear the names of Roberto Duran, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, and obviously Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. And names like that, when you're that age, they stick out because they're not your typical names that you hear every day. So back then I was into football, obviously, and it was Rangers and Celtic and things like that, not basic stuff, but nothing standoutish. A name like Marvin Hagler, who's actually called Marvelous, Roberto Hands of Stone Duran, I'm thinking, who are these men? They just sound like superheroes. So I was raised on that. I didn't actually get to see it till I was about a teenager anyway.
Right.
But that is the fight that I can watch on repeat for 2 reasons. One, it's never boring, obviously.
Yeah.
Even though you know what's going to happen. 2, it's quick as well. And 3, you're just sucked in by what you're watching because you're seeing these 2 men, one who says things like, if you cut my head open, you will find a boxing glove inside it. And you've got a guy called Thomas Hearns, who was known as the Hitman or the Motor City Cobra. I just find things like that sexy. I do, honestly. You're just seduced into all that. And Las Vegas, the famous people that were there, and they just went hell for leather. I mean they did some things in it that were obviously right from a technical standpoint, but it was a war. And yeah, that's the fight that I can just watch on repeat, on loop. That and probably anything featuring Arturo Gatti.
Okay.
For obvious reasons, because again, rarely dull.
It's amazing. The thing that kind of strikes me about Thomas was in like 2 absolutely classic fights before he was like 27.
Yeah.
Like he was I think he was 22 when he fought Ray Leonard.
Yeah.
And I think he was 26, 27 when he fought Marvin Hagler. It's just, we talk now about fighters now. It's like, oh, they're not ready. And it's like, Tommy Hearns was 22 when he fought Ray Leonard. They were something special, those 4 fighters. And I don't know if you guys saw recently that Brian Dugan's written a new book about Hagler Leonard.
Yes.
That's going to be quite the read. So I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their pre-orders in for that one. I have to see if we can get Brian on the podcast. That'd be great. What about you, Paul? What's your kind of like go-to fight what you'd watch every single, like you could watch 100 times that you've watched the most?
It's surprised you. It's Marco Antonio Barrera against Eric Morales, number one. I was dead chuffed the other day when I made a comment about Eric Morales and he liked it. I had to do a screenshot of it. I was that chuffed. In terms of other fights, I mean, I could pretty much go through sort of various eras and pick one from them because as boxing enthusiasts that we all are, I noticed that Cal's wearing a fantastic Jack Johnson hoodie there, and I'm guessing it's to do with the Galveston Giant as opposed to the singer. And I could think of Jack Johnson fights, Jack Dempsey when he won the title in 1919. Absolutely. I mean, that was almost the heavyweight version of Hagler Hearns to an extent. Maybe not in terms of the return that Dempsey was getting versus sort of Hagler and Hearns, where it was literally sort of you didn't know who was going to win it at one point. But Dempsey went in there with a much bigger guy and was wiping the teeth off his glove at one point, and it was sort of pure chaos 2-3 rounds there. Every era you can go through, Joe Louis going through, etc. And agreeing what Sean said, anything he was in was fantastic. It was a great weight, a great division, a great era. So boxing, it's very wholesome. It can pull you in so many directions, and there's so many different fighters and eras that you can suddenly just switch to. So you know what, tonight I fancy a bit of this, and so yeah. But yeah, my go-to fight would be Morales Barrera, number one. It's a cracker.
Yeah, and we did the special podcast on that one, Paul, if the people at home haven't listened to it. Yeah, it's what I like to call timeless material. You can always go back and watch the fight, but you can also go back and listen to the podcast anytime you like because it doesn't age. So mine is, for anyone that's interested, is Lennox Lewis against Hasim Rahman 2, which was the anniversary of yesterday. I'm a Lennox Lewis super fan. Actually love him. There's a new documentary out about him, which,
there is.
Which I'm looking forward. I know Boxing Social have covered that. I've done a review. I think it's Terry Dooley's written something on that, which will be really in.
I did a review for it as well.
Oh, did you?
For Pro Boxing Fan. Definitely worth a look. I won't sort of, give you too much. You obviously know quite a lot about Lewis, but the thing about having a documentary is the opportunity to shine a torch into a few previously sort of unknown corners, and it certainly does that. But Lewis comes across as a man of integrity. He's got some great people involved in it. You've got Dr. Dre doing the the narration. Dr. Dre's got one of those voices. He's not Morgan Freeman. There's only one Morgan Freeman, and Morgan Freeman can talk about the mating habit of a ladybird and make it sound like crikey, Back to the Future. It doesn't matter what he's talking about. But without a doubt, Dr. Dre does a great job in narration there. And you get to relive some of those finer moments. In the Rahman fight, number 2, I always remember he did that 3/4 length left hook and then threw the right hand over the top. And I'll never forget, apart from when Rahman's head dropped on the canvas, he had the Don King emblem over his head. But it was the cheek of Rahman. Lewis did that little twist of the glove at the end as he hit him, and it split open the cheekbone. I can't think of any other fighter that split open a cheekbone with one punch. And Lennox Lewis had enough power in there to be able to do that, to split the cheekbone open of an elephant that night. There was nothing that was going to stop him.
We had he had quite bad scar tissue on his face, didn't he, Hasim Rahman? I think he had survived a car crash in his younger days, and perhaps that's why it split open like that. But still, Lennox Lewis had ridiculous power, and
underrated at times too, I thought.
Underrated at times, and I remember feeling quite surprised when Boxing News rated him. I think they had him at number 2 as their greatest heavyweights ever. They did one of their Booker zines.
Right. Okay.
And I don't know if I've got it here. I think I left it at work. But they, on one of their Booker zines, it was like top 100 heavyweights, and I think they had Lennox Lewis number 2 or maybe number 3. It might have been Ali Lewis and then Lennox Lewis. I can't remember, but I remember being surprised how high they had them. Is the point? Yeah. The point I'm making, because he is one of those that's always kind of underrated. And at the same time, me personally, I've always found Mike Tyson to be overrated. For me, he's always been a TV fighter. I've never really looked at him as much greater than that, really. What was, Sean, the first fight you saw in the flesh?
In the flesh, as
not in a car park, in a box.
In a car park, there's been a few. In the flesh, I've mentioned this before, but it's quite a unique one. I didn't get to my first fight until I started doing reports for Boxing News. I can't remember what age I was. I was in my 20s anyway. And what was I? No, I'd be in my 30s actually, sorry. And it was a fight that took place in a theatre in Glasgow. It was a Scottish welterweight or light middleweight title fight between Gary McMillan and Gary Young, promoted by Alex Morrison. And the venue itself basically was used for things like pantomimes. So you would have there Aladdin, Snow White, Jack and the Beanstalk and things like that, not boxing. To my knowledge, I don't know how many events or shows were held there in the past, but the ring itself was actually on the stage, and the fans were in the seats as if they were watching, Jack and the Beanstalk or whatever. And the media were on the stage as well. And that was the first time that I'd met Alex Morrison. And I've never felt a handshake in my life quite like it. To him, it would be quite gentle, but his hand was flat, no knuckles. He introduced himself, shook my hand, and I walked away with that hand in my pocket, trying not to cry. Sat down and watched a quite enthralling night of fights. The main event had some bad blood. There had been things said back and forth. I think one of the fighters got cut early, and it was just a really surreal, unique night. I've been to fights since, obviously, in established venues, but that's the only time I've ever been to a show in a theatre that really was held for things like magic and pantomimes. Quite surreal.
That's brought me back to when I was a kid, and my mum took me to the local theatre. It's the Beck Theatre in Hayes. It's semi-famous. And it was to watch wrestling, and it was very similar to that. The ring was on the stage, and the main event, do you know who was in? The Bushwhackers. It was a great thrill. It really was. That was it. Sean's doing it. They all they came in doing that towards the ring, and it was like, oh my god, we're actually watching wrestling. My first fight was prize fight 2, cruiserweights. Ovill McKenzie won. I was caught 2, not prize fight 2. I was caught 2. What was yours, Paul? What was the first fight you saw in the flesh?
Well, funnily enough, I was actually at that same cruiserweight one as well. I don't remember you there, Cal. You obviously didn't do your streak that night, so otherwise I would remembered it. But
I was ringside as well. I was only a couple of rows behind Barry Hearn.
Okay. I've got photos where I think as was then, Frank Maloney was sitting in the front seat, and I was about 6 rows back, I think. So I used to live near to Brentford Leisure Centre, and they'd always have live boxing shows there. And to be honest, I couldn't even tell you who was fighting. They were really, really bland, and it was just always you're sort of sitting there with the smell of the chlorine from the pool next door, and they were always really, really sort of naff fights. So for me, the most memorable first sort of live fight that I saw, that I'll sort of put down as maybe my my landmark first fight, so to say, was 2004 York Hall. A mate of mine was fighting on the undercard, but the headliner was Keith Long against Matt Skelton, and one of the other undercard people was Ross Minter. And I'll always remember going to the pub across the road from the York Hall, and Alan Minter was in there having a beer, and I walked over, and I was like, oh my god, it's Alan Minter, and those are the days sort of pre-camera phones or whatever. And because Ross won the fight, afterwards I had my my program in hand, And I went over to Alan and I said, "Is there any chance you could sign my program?" And I went, "Oh shit, I haven't got a pen." He went, "Don't worry, son." He's like, "Don't worry, son. I've got a pen right here." And he come out with it and signed it. He went, "Didn't he box beautiful tonight?" I went, "He certainly did, Alan." He went, "God bless, mate. See you later." And that was it. And it literally just sort of disappeared. So yeah, I got to just off that sort of peripheral. I managed to interview Alan Minter last year, and we had a little chit chat about him and Marvin Hagler. It was just great to hear him sort of walking down memory lane. It's yeah, R.I.P. He was a good one. But yeah, that was my first one that I'll put down. The other thing as well, I remember sitting directly in front of me was a former Page 3 model, Joe Guest, and I just remember thinking, bloody hell! I was like, woo! At that point, they could have Muhammad Ali in there against George Foreman and Mike Tyson. I wouldn't have noticed a single thing, you know. I was, yes. She walked in a little bit late into the show and sat down, and she was getting a round of applause. And yeah, I think I joined in actually. So there we go.
Oh, right. Well, excellent stuff there, Paul. So I thought we'd kind of move on to kind of like the hot news of the day, which is that I should announce the champion first, really. Which is Callum. Yep. We have been told Chris Williamson was very firm about that on Twitter with you, earlier on. The champion should always be announced first. I have to agree there. So Canelo-Smith is to defend his WBA and Ring Magazine titles against Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's my pound for pound number one. I don't know about you guys. Paul, what's kind of your thoughts on that announcement and the fight itself?
I'm delighted. It's the fight everyone wants to see. I mean, you know, when the Yildirim sort of rumours started to crop up, I thought you've got to be kidding. So, you know, farm a month job here. So, and Canelo-Smith, you can tell, has been holding out for that big paycheck. It's kind of like reminds me of when Rocky Fielding won the title and then got the opportunity to fight for $1 million. And it's all about, you know, you're taking a lot of punches in the face and you're going up at top level. You want to get the big money. So for Canelo-Smith, he's been holding out, waiting for that big super fight to an extent, so that he can have that legacy pot of cash for his family. Because otherwise, he would have got in and fought against, I don't know, a rematch against John Ryder or whoever, and maybe made a few $100,000 after taxes and whatever else, have enough to maybe buy a little flat investment or something. You know, don't get me wrong, you know, it would have been a nice six-figure sum. But this is a defining fight. This is what will make him go to the gym every day. This is what will make him do 3 runs a day and the extra run on top of that. And it's exactly what Canelo-Smith needs at this point. For Canelo, it's just about him, again, answering another question. Can he take on another one of the best? And it's a cracking fight. It really is. I mean, you start sort of doing comparisons and think to yourself, John Ryder caused Canelo-Smith a lot of problems. You know, some people believe that he even won the fight. And that's because he fights out of that crouch. And he's southpaw, isn't he? Memory serves me, John Ryder. So he makes things very awkward, and he can counter well. He can come on the attack, and that's kind of similar to Canelo as well. He can do sort of both of those sort of forms of fighting. So I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. I really do. You've got someone who has got to be near on what, a 5-6 inch. Height and reach advantage, packs a lot of power, but has not been in with anyone vaguely close to a seasoned as Canelo. So the only thing I haven't found out yet, or maybe it hasn't been announced, is where's it going to take place? I'm guessing stateside.
It's in Texas, yeah. But as to where, I don't think it's been announced, but I would imagine they might be going for the same venue as Santa Cruz against Davis from a couple of weeks back, so they can get some fans in. I would assume so anyway. I would hope so.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does.
Well, I cannot wait. I think that's the fight. I mean, to be honest, the fight that I'm waiting to see at the moment, I've been waiting for a while. Again, will come no surprise, is Dubois versus Joyce. So I cannot wait to see that. But after that, this is the fight I'm looking forward to see.
It's a cracking end of the year, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. 6 days before Christmas.
Oh, my God. And
lovely
then
present.
It's just the run into the new year in terms of the fights that are coming. Obviously, we've got Conor Benn this weekend. We've got Dubois and Joyce in a week and a half's time. After that, we've got Ryan Garcia. Luke Campbell's moved to Boxing Day now.
Apparently, yeah.
That's been moved to Boxing Day now. Billy Joe Saunders against Mike Murray and
Joshua as well.
Yeah, there's just there's Joshua and Pulev. Like, there's so many good fights coming up to the new year. It really is. It's good that they've packed so much in. What are kind of your initial thoughts on the Smith Canelo fight, Sean?
I was happy. Also relieved that it wasn't Avni Yildirim. Because as Paul said, I mean, that's just pointless. But getting away from that, I like fights where there's a lot of questions to be answered, and there is in this fight. I know that the backlash overnight has been based on Smith's performance against John Ryder, which is fair enough. But you can't tell me that he's going to show up and perform like that again against, for many, the best fighter on the planet. Everyone is allowed a bad night at the office. Smith's had a few. But as Paul said, his motivation levels will be through the roof for this, because what lies at the end of it is superstardom, pound for pound rankings, loads more money, more credibility, just everything. I like the fact that it's a fight where we're seeing Canelo go up against someone who is a fully fledged super middle, arguably could campaign at light heavy, has got that jab, has got the reach, has got the height, the power, has got a good boxing brain, puts his shots together well. I don't think he'll be overawed by the experience. And I just think it's a fight where I know that Canelo is about 7-2 on, I think was the odds that I saw, which makes him a long favourite. But to coin the phrase, Smith is a very live dog in this fight. I would still tip Canelo to win, but I don't think it's as straightforward as many people are thinking. And if they are just basing it on one performance, that is extremely unfair on Smith, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're looking to match Canelo with someone between 160 and 175, outside of Artur Beterbiev, you would probably say next best is Callum Smith. Golovkin, that stuff's been done to death.
Bivol would be in the frame.
Bivol would be up there. I think Canelo would handle Bivol comfortably. But
dare I throw in there someone that I've said for a while that I still believe could beat him if he's
go on. I know what you're going to say. Go on, have your fun.
Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah.
That if he behaves himself, stays away from the Mackies, and lives the life, when he's on his day with the right footwork and movement, etc., he would drive Canelo up the wall, and I think he would do the same with Golovkin as well. He'd be a ghost in there, and he'd be peppering and moving around, and that's it. He'd never try to win by a knockout, but in the same breath, because he's able to compute knowledge very quickly. It's like when he was fighting with Andy Lee. He did some beautiful counters there, which sort of put Andy on his backside, and Andy's a very good fighter, a very intelligent fighter. So and you've got to remember that Golovkin and Canelo, they've got cement feet, they're very clever cement feet and very clever boxing brains, but they're not light on their feet. So yeah, my wild card to who would win would be Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. Let's move on to that, because Billy Joe Saunders is fighting Martin Murray, who's 38. Has never done anything at super middleweight, hasn't won a fight of note in 3 years. What was it? Gabe Rosado was the last time he beat somebody that most of us would have heard of. you tooted the horn for Billy Joe there, Paul. So tell us, what the fuck?
Well, I've got,
What?
I obviously wrote Martin Murray's autobiography, so I'm going to say that he's going to go in there and do a fantastic. One thing I do know about Martin is that it's his last chance saloon here, and I think he's going to have a melting pot of things going through his head at the moment, which is everybody knows that he's the massive underdog. Everybody knows that they're saying that his best was a few years ago, and he knows himself obviously as well that physically and whatever else, and as we age, all these different things, it would have been ideal to have had it a few years ago, which obviously it was supposed to be. But even like going back, say 2013, which was probably his best performance ever when he fought against Martinez and didn't get the decision. Yeah. So that was when he was 31, and he did absolutely, he was faultless sort of in that. Billy Joe Saunders, I don't think will be able to stop Martin because he's as hard as hell, with the exception of Golovkin. He's never been stopped, and he went 11 rounds. At the time, he was the first person to go 11 rounds. But I think this is almost a bit of a case of Billy Joe maybe feeling he wants to close the chapter of what was never sort of fully closed, in terms of Martin saying, you bottled it, you fucked me again here. It's the second time you've pulled out, and then he ends up by having sort of other fights against. I mean, you got to remember the last bloke that Billy Joe Saunders fought against was far from stellar, and Martin could have easily have fought him then. So yes, I think it's maybe not so much a case of who Martin's facing. It's more a case of who Billy Joe is facing. And on this occasion, I'd probably say that Martin's a better opponent than his last one. And just expect Martin to leave absolutely everything in the ring here. He's more comfortable at super middleweight. He was always killing himself to make 11 stone 6, although he would do it. But I'm gonna, like I said, I'm a good friend with Martin, so I'm always going to be very sort of biased here, and I just hope that he's able to win the victory.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on Saunders and Murray, Sean?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts.
Go on, son.
Look, when Saunders fought and beat Lemieux, regardless of what was going on in terms of negotiations for future fights, mega fights, that was the time to strike, because his popularity was through the roof because of the performance and because of that thing he did in the ring where Lemieux threw the punch and whatnot. As a fight, that's what it is. It's a fight. I can't really, give it too much credibility. I think Martin's been a great servant for the sport. He should have got the win against Martinez. I think most would agree with that. It's not his fault that he's been asked to fight Saunders. He's been asked to fight Billy Joe Saunders. Of course he's going to say yes. I just think it's another, not so much a black mark against Saunders' CV or his career. I just think it's another sign that we're never going to see the very best of Billy Joe Saunders. I truly believe it's always going to be a case of what might have been. Now, he has beat some good fighters, but as Paul says, on his day, I think too that he's capable of giving the very, very best absolute kittens. But I'm beginning to think now that boat has sailed, and it's been years now, and he's been in and out of so much stupidity. With even just things like the way what he's doing online, what he got fined for by the board more than once. It's just a continuation, and I would assume or expect that surely when this fight was announced, he wasn't expecting a positive reaction, because he's talked the talk for too long now about Triple G and Canelo, and it's just never happened. To me, it's a fight. Is it worthy of a world title fight? No. If it's a chance to get Saunders back to what he does best, he's back working now with a Tibbs again, Mark Tibbs. If it can set him straight for next year and he gets the big fights, great. But we just don't know, do we? Because next week, for all we know, Saunders could end up doing something daft. We just can't depend on him at all. And until he gets that big fight, until he performs in that big fight, I don't think many people will be interested in what he does or who he fights.
Yeah. Here's a question, just I guess for everyone is if Billy Joe comes through and retains his WBO title, and Canelo beats Smith, and has got a couple of straps. I mean, I'm just thinking when he beat Rocky Fielding, he picked up the WBA strap. Where did that go? I'm not sure. Does he still hold that?
Strap. Probably pissing in the wind.
Yeah. So there's potential there for a bit of unification, but the issue is that Canelo, every fight Canelo has had, I think, in the last 4 or 5 has been at a different weight division. So it's you just kind of, he's like a frog at the moment, jumping around the lily pads. He's just not happy whichever one he's landing on,
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think with the WBA regular belt, I think if that will disappear when if Canelo wins, then I imagine that belt would kind of disappear. I think you're right. I think he has been jumping from division to division. I don't see him at middleweight again, Canelo. I don't think he's going back down there again. It's super middle or it's light heavy now. I think super middle is where he's going to stick around. He's made himself a free agent, through the courts, which is he's got rid of, he's got rid of Oscar De La Hoya. He's left Golden Boy. He's a free agent now, so he could go and fight Caleb Plant on PBC. He could fight David Benavidez, which would be imagine that on Mexican Independence Day. Oh my God, the scenes! God, yeah, that would that would kick off in the stands as well. That would be great.
Yeah.
That really. So Canelo's got the world in front of him now. Early predictions for Canelo-Smith. Let's go early, and then I'll maybe ask you closer to the time. What are you thinking on Canelo-Smith, Sean?
Canelo points something like 116, 112.
Paul?
Ooh, can I give more than one answer?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so if I've got to give the one which I'm down to bookies and I've only got one bet, then to be honest, I'd probably, not just because Sean's has said it, I'd probably mirror what Sean said. It's not going to be a landslide, but options 2 and 3 exist. Canelo to win by stoppage between 9-12. That's my other thoughts. Not saying that because like Kovalev wearing it down because Smith's a completely different animal. Kovalev was gassed to hell. Smith has got a fantastic tank. It's more a case of he's very clever with his little lean backs and leading you into traps. And Smith, has got a big heart and he's going to want to try and put on a performance. So he might step in there and get caught by a little something. But again, Joe Gallagher's a wily old trainer, so he's probably preparing him for that. Who knows? But the other one is that Smith catches him and stops him, and that's worth putting a £5 bet on or a £1 bet on. Because I bet you're going to get great odds there of a stoppage of any round there. You put £1 for each round. I'm sure that you'd probably get anywhere between sort of £10 upwards in terms of return there. And I genuinely believe he's got the power to stop anyone at 168. So let's see. But if money depending on it, I'm going to back up Sean and say around 116, 112. That's a very good prediction.
I think people need to as well look at the fact that Smith himself, forget about the height and the reach and the jab. When he catches you, no matter if you're a half shot George Groves or not, he is going to do damage, because people were saying last night with Smith's frame, he's going to be getting pounded on the ribs, throughout the fight. Well, what if the reverse happens? What if Smith starts catching Canelo downstairs?
He's a very good body puncher.
He's a very good body puncher, and he will feel it. So I think in this day and age with the internet and social media, it's very easy just to dismiss a British fighter who's fighting one of the best guys, because that's what we do. I think it would be much better if we actually examined what Callum can do well, rather than just thinking after he fought Ryder he'll get blasted out. If he starts landing shots to the ribs against Canelo and starts getting him on the inside especially, it will be a long night for the Mexican. But it's all ifs, buts and maybes.
That's it. That is it. And I imagine I've got this feeling that, Paul, you're one of those guys that on fight week you change predictions like the wind, don't you? Tell the truth.
I look at the I start to look at the way they're training, and maybe just sometimes you look at the fighter's face, you can see if they're sort of maybe a little bit plump or they're starting to shrink, and I start to make sort of guesses there in terms of whether or not they've been sort of good in training and behaving themselves, So, but as we said before, and as Sean said, and I said, I think Callum's going to be in the absolute most immaculate shape of his life coming in here, and like Sean said as well, whilst Canelo's trying to go maybe for the body shots, Smith might be watching a few of the a few rounds of the Mayweather Canelo fight, where when Canelo was trying to come in, Mayweather was using the uppercut as Canelo was dipping down and then stepping off to the side, and that would be a great honey punch for Smith, because all he has to do is a quick snap, move to the left or right, and he's in his space again. I think what Smith needs to be doing is owning the centre of the ring. He's a big lad, and he doesn't want to be letting Canelo get in, because he can bully very easily, and he's got those very strong legs where he can. So once he's in, it's tough to sort of get him off. But if he can own the centre of the ring behind the jab, and every time he does come forward, keep throwing something, I think that's going to be the secret to Callum, is if he can suffocate him with volumes, and if he can do that, there's a possibility that Canelo might get frustrated again, using the example of Mayweather there, because when he was frustrated against Mayweather, he came out swinging, and that was perfect for Mayweather. All he did was just pick him off all night.
Yeah, and if the scenario you just described there, Paul, if Smith decides to punch with Canelo and he clips him, he could hurt Canelo. I think what you say is right as well. I think he does have to take ring center, Smith. You talk about the Mayweather fight. That's exactly what Floyd did that night. He walked him down, a welterweight in the ring. I think he weighed 146 on the night, and he walked Canelo down, and Canelo didn't know what to do. I think Canelo's much better boxing going back now. I think he's much better at that now. I think the Floyd fight was probably the best learning curve of his career, but he can do it now, Canelo boxing going back. But I think Smith has to take ring center and has to try and walk Canelo down, because if he lets Canelo dictate pace and take ring center, he'll get stopped, I think. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point of trying to walk him down. It's doing something which Canelo is not expecting, and again, another example of the person you wouldn't think doing the walking down that worked really well was when Andre Ward went in against Carl Froch. Carl Froch throughout the build-up saying all he's going to do is get on his bicycle and he's going to bop and move around. No, he went to him in the middle of the ring, traded, and Froch was punching against a ghost. His little lean backs with the shoulder and everything else. Andre Ward had him every single round. Carl Froch was not prepared that way. He prepared for setup, with the jab, throw the right hand, get those body shots going. It didn't allow him enough space to do that. He stood in close, and it worked perfectly. So listen, we all want Smith to win. That's an absolute given. And if he was to do with knockout, they need to start building statues, not statues singular. They need to start building statues of Callum Smith. I think one for every city throughout the UK. I think that would be a very reasonable request.
That's absolutely fair. One small thing, it looks like that this fight is going to be aired on Dazn over here on the app. It's like £2 a month. Is that right, Sean? Something like that?
It's £1 $99 for a month, but I know that is an introductory offer.
Right.
So how long that lasts, I don't know if it'll be 3 months, 1 month, I don't know. And then it'll obviously shoot up in price to something that you pay for, like Netflix or Amazon, or something like that. I don't know.
I think it's about 80 quid a year, like $100 a year.
Yeah.
For Dazn. But to be honest, I will absolutely do that. I've given myself a million different reasons why I need to do it. You suddenly think, you could usually be thinking 80 quid. Okay, well, I could do that for this. That. No, I came up with reasons very fast as to why I need to do it, and I started thinking, okay, 80 quid. Well, think about it. It's like, a couple of hoodies. You don't buy a couple of hoodies. Or the next thing I'd say, well, don't go out and buy this, that, and the other. Don't drive around so much. I was coming out with ideas left, right, and centre. Dazn, the second it comes out, early December, bang. I'm probably going to be in their top 5 people to sign up. I will be signing. I'll be like throwing my credit card at the screen. I'm in, definitely.
Yeah, but you won't be able to buy any British vintage boxing stuff for a month. Then Paul Zen's going to be out there shaking the tin, dancing for change.
I'll be walking around in my Y fronts, mate. It's going to get cold, but I'm willing to do it.
Absolutely, I think if you're Adam Smith at Sky Sports, I think Sky will always be the big. They'll always be the big hitters. I think you've got the Sky. I think having Premier League football.
Yeah.
I think it ties into boxing, the boxing audience so much, and I think Sky Sports will always be the big cheeses because they have as long as they have Premier League football, they will be the big cheeses.
Yeah.
But if you're Adam Smith and you see Dazn coming over here and they're probably going to get the Canelo fight, you got to be a bit fucked off, Sean.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this will be a shock to him. I mean,
no, it's been coming.
It's been coming, and I think there was a photo of the Dazn headquarters that circled round online months ago. I mean, he will have known about this for a long, long time, but it'll still hurt. But landscape, as they say, has changed. We now have more options. Sky don't have it all to themselves. BT, Premier Sports now as well. Still got Box Nation, DAZN, I think Channel 5, ITV showed Ultimate Boxer.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just his phrase is we can't have every sweetie in the jar, I think.
Yeah.
Well, damn straight, because times have changed, and that's just the way that it's going to be. And when that kind of thing happens, you can be a bit cheesed off, but you just got to adapt and move on, and improve what you're offering. How they do that, that's up to them, but you can't just stand still. You just got to accept it, move on, and compete with your competitors and ultimately beat them.
Absolutely. I think, you don't want a monopoly.
No.
But at the same time, you don't want to be paying for 6-7 different products.
No.
That gives you the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We want to watch boxing, but like you've just said there, Sean, we have to pay Sky, BT, Premier Sports. I don't know if anyone pays for that, but and then Channel 5 and whatever. So it's a lot to pay for. Talking of Premier Sports, we did have a question, Paul, if you could help answer it. Do you think we will ever see Terence Crawford hit his potential? So we've already covered the Brook fight on Sunday, so I don't want to talk too much about that. Long term for Crawford, do you think he ever meets the potential that we all believe that he has?
I think the answer to that question is Errol Spence Jr. If he has that fight, that's the defining one that everyone wants to know. And again, we can't assume that he's going to walk through Danny Garcia. There's a few little theories at the moment that something might have been taken out of Errol Spence in that car accident he had, and mentally, physically, is he fully sort of bouncing back? And Garcia is known as a quick start fighter, and if he goes in there and tries to sort of swarm Errol, and for whatever reason Errol's just has a bit of a bad moment, then that's it. So what we need Errol Spence Jr. to absolutely spank Garcia and come out of that glowing, and then Terence Crawford takes him on. And I think that sticks Terence nicely at, for me, pound for pound, number one. I think Terence Crawford has matured fantastically as a fighter. People forget going back. I mean, he fought against Ricky Burns, years and years ago. And let's remember, Ricky Burns, a fantastic fighter. People just forget about this man. Scotland's only ever 3-weight world champion, apart from being an absolutely stellar man and an absolutely lovely guy, but a very, very good fighter. Do you remember when he fought against Kevin Mitchell? And Kevin was bloody good at that point, and he stopped him in 4 rounds. So Terence Crawford fought against him, and firstly, that's Terence still sort of climbing up the ranks. Since then, my goodness, I mean, what an absolute pleasure to see him. He computes information every few seconds, and the way he's able to read what the fighter in front of him is doing and react to it is phenomenal. What I love about him as well is he can sometimes throw 3 or 4 little dummies before actually landing a punch, but he's already worked it out in his head those dummies he's going to do. And it's almost as if he's in the gym sort of like doing nothing but throwing dummy punches before he's going to land one, in mass. The 4, 5, 6 punch routines with literally the intention of landing one. I think he's a fantastic fighter to look at. He's silky smooth. He's always extremely polite. The Spence fight for me is what will make him great. And then from there on, it depends. I mean, there's some serious young bloods coming through at the moment. And for me, and it's not a case if you heard it first, because it's not going to be news to anyone, but I said it about 2 years ago. As Virgil Ortiz Jr. is going to become a multi-weight champion. Yeah. And at some point, if Virgil Ortiz Jr. was to fight against Terence Crawford, that could be Terence's sort of turning point. But for the moment, I think beats Errol Spence Jr., he becomes the ring pound for pound number one, possibly. That for me, that's the defining moment. Yeah.
What do you think, Sean? What do you think of Crawford, kind of his career going forward? He's 33.
Yeah.
His best win is Postol?
Gamboa? I don't know, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that we're talking about someone who's a pound for pound star, but we don't know what his best win is. But that's not because of of the stellar standard of opponent he's fought. It's just that everyone he's fought has either been okay or good. But I wouldn't say that he's fought anyone that is an outstanding opponent where you didn't know who was going to win that night. But I will bat for Team Crawford every day. I've been a massive fan of his for a long time. And what's quite funny is I remember one of his fights on Box Nation. It was either against Andrei Klimov or a guy called Sanabria. And it was an awful fight, but he won. And I can remember, I think it was Steve Lillis, saying that he stunk the place out. I think it was an awful fight, and it gave no indication that he was ever going to become who he did. Mm. And now we're talking about him as being one of the most entertaining fighters to watch once he gets going. And that's it. Is that people speak about him being a slow starter? I actually think that works in his favour, because when you look at his fights, when he does make slow starts, I think it gives his opponent self-belief that they perhaps didn't have before the fight, and they're almost getting lulled into a false sense of security, and then Crawford strikes when he officially warms up, and you saw that on Sunday against Brook. Brook did well for the first 2 rounds. Jab was going well. Okay, and then Crawford just struck. That was it. And that's all it takes for a great fighter to do. Yeah. I think he's fantastic. I think he's the complete package. I can't find one is that these days he does like to fight.
Yeah.
That he sometimes does ignore his defense, and he's got away with it so far because of who he's fought. But if he comes against a prime Errol Spence who has suffered no repercussions from this car accident, he will need to be on his game because Spence is a big dude. He's got great fundamentals. He packs power. He can answer everything that Crawford can throw at him. And interestingly, is if Spence does a job on Garcia, that will trump anything that Crawford has, because I don't think Crawford's got a win that would match a statement win from Spence over Mikey Garcia.
Yeah.
Crawford's contract with Top Rank expires, is it next October, I think?
Yes, yeah. Next October, yeah.
So we're talking 11 months.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen in that time, whether he can get his way out of it if it ends up in court, because recent quotes and sound bites are starting to present a potential messy situation, because Bob Arum's been saying some not too flattering things about Crawford and the money he's had to pay out, and it's looking like a messy end, to be honest.
Yeah. Paul, do you think there's a world where Bob Arum lets Crawford go?
Yeah.
Because it is costing him the earth.
Not without a fight, no. You're looking at someone there who's been, Christ, I heard rumours that he was ringside when John L. Sullivan won the title. So he's been there and seen everything. But he's in the business, and we're not talking show business. We're talking the money business here, and he will always want to try to make sure that he has a secure investment. And Terence Crawford is obviously a bit of a honeypot. So it's that's the sad part of boxing, to be honest, which is that a lot of things get hinged on the purses, etc. And coming back to Sean's sort of favourite fight before of Hagler Hearns. I'm sure there was some good money flying around there, but those two, their characters at that age, if someone had said to them, listen, it's going to be at the back of Morrison's car park in Greenford, it's just going to be at 3 a.m, you're up for it, they'd have been down with it, and that's it. There would have been no sort of ifs or buts, so. But these days, unfortunately, fights are not being made that fast due to the fact that it's money. And I understand that, which is a shame. But Bob Arum is a massive hurdle, more than, unfortunately, you can just sort of do a regular skip and jump over. So, that's Bob Arum.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think, I think for me, I think Crawford needs to see out his 11 months and take it on his own, basically. When he has to look at I think the generation of Mayweather and Pacquiao get a kind of a bad rap, particularly Mayweather. I think people look at him as like, everyone protects their own now because of Mayweather, really. I think a lot of people feel that way, but I think what Mayweather did was, and Ray Leonard before him, Lennox Lewis before him, well, in between them, Ray Leonard is the best example here of doing it on your own and not relying on Bob Arum. And I think he does need to leave and be his own man, and he's got a name now, Crawford, and go and make the fight with Errol Spence. And I think it's really smart on PBC's part that they're putting in Spence with Danny Garcia, because if Spence wins and he wins well, he's back, no problem, no issue. But if Danny Garcia beats him, it stays in house. They're not handing over the crown to some fucking random. They're handing over the crown to one of their guys.
One of their guys, yeah.
It's really smart on PBC's part. They're gonna see what Spence has got left, and it's a really, really fascinating matchup. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. I think that's December 5th. That one.
Yeah.
We were asked another question. I'm conscious of time, but we've got a minute. We're fine. What happens first, Crawford Spence or Yard Buatsi? Paul.
Ooh, I'd like either, to be honest. I interviewed Joshua about 2 months ago, and I won't say the publication I've done it for because it'll be out in around sort of January. But the editor came back to me and he said, was that interview done on email? And I said, no, I said it was done on the phone. He went, wow. He said, Joshua Buatsi is one of the best spoken guys. And I went, well, if he hadn't have done boxing, I said he would have become an accountant with the degree he had. I said, selfishly, I'm happy that I'm selfishly happy that he decided to pursue boxing. So, Yard Buatsi needs to happen because it's another great domestic dust up on the lines of Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce. Buatsi has the ability to sort of work his way through British, European, and world titles without a doubt. His last fight was certainly a good test for him against a very sturdy opponent. Spence Crawford, I fear, will not happen until possibly even the back end of next year, whether that be through politics, and it could even be that Crawford sort of surfs out the rest of his time with Arum. Excuse me, simply because he probably realises already that that's a super fight waiting to happen, and by sort of stepping outside of that contract, doing it himself, managing himself, he can earn a shitload more cash on his own. Obviously, I'd like to see it happen now. I'd like to see it happen before even a Spence fight, so Garcia. But yeah, either one, don't mind whichever one happens first. Realistically, which one will happen first? Buatsi against Yard. They're both great fights. Four very good fighters. Let's not be harsh on Yard because he got stopped by Kovalev, a very durable fighter, very experienced fighter, and he wobbled Kovalev. There's been a lot of great comments from various other fighters after. Buatsi even said in the interview I did with him, he says, he was unlucky that night. I interviewed Artur Beterbiev at the beginning of this year, and he said Yard did well. It was just Kovalev was too experienced, and that's it. Yard lives in the gym, lies in the camp, whatever, but he really does live in the gym, and he loves boxing, as does Joshua Buatsi. Two totally different personalities. Lovely guys. Don't speak out of turn. That's another one. I would actually do a pay-per-view for. I think it's worthy of that, as opposed to a lot of the crap that's out there at the moment, currently on sort of pay-per-view. Spence Crawford, yeah, all day long. I will lap that up like bread with gravy.
What one do you think happens first, Sean?
Depends on the egos of everyone involved. And it depends on perhaps who loses next. I mean, obviously, Yard has got that loss, but he still brings a lot to, as they say, the table. What happens first? It's a coin flip. If I was going to pick, I would probably say Yard Buatsi happens, but I would be happy if Yard Buatsi didn't happen and Crawford Spence did. Crawford Spence is the type of fight that boxing needs, especially on the world scene. I mean, we see UFC and Dana White how soft boxing's doing. Yard Buatsi won't do much for the sport except in Britain, whereas Spence Crawford will. So what will happen first? I think it'll be Yard Buatsi. But realistically, I can't see either happening until some things change, like contracts expire, a fighter gets beat, or some egos settle down and forget about who they are, take their head out their arse, and remember what they're actually doing this for. I don't think Yard Buatsi has to happen. If it don't happen, I'm okay with that. I think they're two good guys, two good fighters. I think Buatsi showed in his last fight there's work to do. If I was Yard's team, I would be making an offer now to get that fight made, because the time, I think, for Yard to get a win perhaps would be now. Crawford Spence we spoke about. But as is the case with boxing all the time, don't be shocked if neither ever happens.
Yeah.
Sorry to be so negative.
No.
But it's hard not to be when you've been hit with so many disappointments over the years.
Yeah.
Crawford Spence needs to happen. Will it happen? Yes. When Crawford leaves Top Rank and inevitably joins PBC, he's not joining Eddie Hearn, no matter what Hearn thinks, no matter what.
It makes no sense.
No, it makes no sense because he just goes sideways if he ends up with Hearn Dazn. The contract needs to expire. Crawford needs to jump ship to PBC straight away, and before the contract does expire, get that fight tied up, so that as soon as he moves, that's his next fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's a curveball to throw in there, straight off from what Sean's saying. Don't be surprised if Terence Crawford suddenly has involvement with MTK. And I know that would have sounded crazy a year ago, but when they suddenly signed up Virgil Ortiz Jr., I was like, okay, it is global. They're taking on the big names. Don't get me wrong, and already had Tyson, Fury, etc. But from this sort of like side of the pond. But to get those sort of names signed up at the moment, when Terence is looking around thinking, I'm trying to look for a deal, MTK are very reasonable negotiators. You never know. I mean, it'd be interesting somewhere along the line to maybe sort of speak to some of these guys who self-managed, the likes of George Groves, and did very well for himself, sort of financially, and obviously, kind of like a lot of fighters, had to take quite a few sort of financial punches in the gut before sort of making that decision for himself. But it worked out well. You almost wonder if someone like that should be holding like a masterclass to up-and-coming fighters to say, if you want to become self-managed, this is how I've done it. It might not work for you, but hey, give it a crack.
I think you're right. I think there's something in there. And I remember George saying, I know how to do an Excel spreadsheet. I know my way around a computer. I don't need someone to do it for me. And it was just after he'd split with Adam Booth and he was able to give Adam Booth 40% of his money for his next 2 fights. I was like, ridiculous. It was makes me sick, the amount of money the managers get paid from fighters, really, because it's like, it's such a short career and it can end literally with a punch. And it's it always upsets me when you see fighters having to pay out so much. We'll wrap it up there. But if you don't mind, I'd love to have you both on again. But I'd like to set you some homework, if you don't mind.
Whoa. I never did well at school. Homework was like a instant divorce.
It might be fun.
Might be fun. It bloody better not be science or French.
So on the last podcast we did on Sunday, it was mentioned that around on Boxing Twitter, some people had said about picking a Ryder Cup team for boxers. Right. So the way I kind of think of it is the classic 8 divisions.
Yeah.
One side picks Europe and the other side picks the US.
Okay.
And then the next time you guys come on, Paul, do you want to have Europe?
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
And Sean, you have the US. Classic 8 divisions, heavyweight, light heavy, middle, etc. And don't tell each other.
You mean, or just anybody?
Anyone in history.
Anyone in history, right, okay.
Doesn't have to be active. Right. Anyone in history.
Yeah, they're alive.
Classic 8 divisions, any fighter, heavyweight down, and then next time you're on, we compare. And we score.
Yeah, cool. I'm up with that. Fine with me. And they can be dead or alive.
Dead or alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem at all. Dead or alive, active, inactive, whatever.
Sure.
Anyone in history.
Okay.
You're the US, Paul's Europe, and I'll be the deciding vote on who wins. All right, thanks, chaps.
No problem. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Good to be on with the both of you, and look forward to the next one.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy work for me. Listening to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Carl. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cal.